1 year ago, Russian President Putin launched an unprovoked attack on Ukraine, exploiting Holocaust history as a pretext for the invasion. This unjust war has left thousands of people dead, millions displaced from their homes, and atrocities committed against innocent people. There is no end in sight. Good morning. I'm historian Edna Friedberg, and today we will be looking at the devastating impact that the war has had on elderly Holocaust survivors who were living in Ukraine last February 24th. We are fortunate to be joined by journalist Rebecca Liss, a contributing producer at Retro Report. Retro Report is a nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization that connects the past with the present. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Edna.
Really glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Last year, in her reporting, Rebecca spoke with a number of Holocaust survivors whose lives were uprooted by the war, and today she'll share some of her insights and reporting. Viewers, please post your questions for Rebecca in the comment section, and we will get to as many of them as we can during the course of the live show. And in fact, we're going to begin with a viewer question. A woman named Ruth is asking, where did the Holocaust occur? I'm reading more about it, but the actual place where it occurred has puzzled me. And that is a very understandable question, Ruth, because although the Holocaust originated in Germany and with the acts and ideology of the Nazi German regime, in fact, it spanned every country in Europe in the course of it. For the purposes of today's program, let's go back in time to June 1941, when Nazi Germany launched a surprise military invasion of its ally, the Soviet Union. Nazi leaders had ambitions of ruling all of Europe, and after the invasion, over 2 million Jewish people now found themselves under occupation by a government, a regime intent on murdering them. So I want to be clear that when we talk about the Holocaust in former Soviet territories, including Ukraine, this is a different Holocaust narrative than many of us may have come to expect. In this case, death came to their hometowns. There were no cattle cars or barbed wire, no shaved heads or striped uniforms. Instead, within days or even hours of arrival, the Germans and their collaborators, oftentimes local collaborators, shot their victims, everyone from tiny babies to the elderly, one by one into mass graves. These were very gory crimes committed face to face. And what is sometimes referred to now as the Holocaust by bullets, actually as many as 1 in 3, as many as 2 million out of the 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust was killed in this way, and so much of it happened on Ukrainian soil. So that is the terrible and devastating historical backdrop against which our conversation will happen today. So thank you, Ruth, for that question. Rebecca, I'd like to start with a question for you and start by talking about a Holocaust survivor who was living at the outset of this war in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol, a woman named Vanda Vasileva. Could you please tell us how you first learned about Vanda? Because you didn't meet her yourself, but how did you learn Vanda's story, and who are we looking at here?
Here we are looking at Vanda as a young girl, I think maybe about 6, with her parents, her mother Maria, her father Dmitri. This is before the war breaks out. And I actually read about her at the beginning of the war in April. And it was a story that really shook me to my core, because I read that she had survived in the Holocaust hiding, and then died in this war hiding. And the tragedy of it was just so much I couldn't comprehend. And I began to look into it, and I reached out. I reached the the rabbi of Mariupol, the only rabbi there, who told me a little bit about Vanda.
And there also, you and I have both been able to watch testimony that Vanda gave to the USC Shoah Foundation in 1998. You and I were both fortunate that a colleague of mine, a Ukrainian colleague of mine here at the museum who speaks Russian, was able to translate Vanda's testimony and tell us more about it. She was only 11 years old when German soldiers occupied her hometown of Mariupol in October 1941, and we are seeing here photographs of German troops entering Mariupol. They ordered Jews living there to wear identifying Star of David badges, and also attempted to register all of the Jews living in town in order to have a list of their targets. Soon after, Germans and local collaborators rounded up some 8,000 Jewish residents and killed them in a mass shooting outside of town. But Vanda was not among them. So, Rebecca, could you please tell our viewers how Vanda avoided getting swept up in the massacre?
Yes, I just want to say I'm so grateful for her in her life that she took the time to record her testimony so that we could know this story. She tells about that she, rather than registering, Jews were required to register with the authorities that they were Jews. She and her mother did not register as Jews. Instead, they went into hiding in their home and avoided capture in the beginning in that way.
And they also survived because of the kindness of people they knew and help, right?
Correct. That's correct. There was neighbors who would tell if authorities came by that they were a Greek family, they were not Jews, or would give them warning that someone was coming by so that they could go and hide.
And I remember from the testimony one time, even a Ukrainian police officer urged Vanda's father to hide her because he was less at risk. And in fact, we have a viewer question related to that. A person named Anne is asking what happened to Vanda's father. And although Vanda's father, Semen, he did have one Jewish parent, so according to Nazi classification, would have been considered Jewish. His Soviet passport only listed his Russian ethnicity. And it was very common that people who came from so-called mixed marriages of one Jewish and non-Jewish parentage would actually list the non-Jewish identity on their passport, because the Soviet Union, while not nearly as dangerous and deadly as Nazi Germany for Jews, was certainly not a place where it was comfortable or advantageous to be Jewish. So this Russian identification of Vanda's father helped shield him during the Holocaust from immediate threat, whereas Vanda's mother did not have that option. So that's why Vanda's father is not hiding, and we're just talking about her and her mother. Rebecca, so in the way that you're describing, Vanda and her mother managed to go under the radar, undetected by the Germans for about 7 months. But all of that changed in May 1942. What did you learn from her testimony?
It's so tragic. The German police came by the home. Now, Vanda was in the backyard, and she took cover in the lilac bushes there. But her mother, Maria, who was 5 months pregnant, here's a just stunning picture of her that breaks my heart, Maria. She was 5 months pregnant, and she was taken away by the Germans. And later on, it's hard to even think of it, a child, Vanda overhears her father and grandmother, learns that her mother was shot twice by the Nazis, as so many of her neighbors were.
So a father and a husband and a daughter lost their mother, their wife, pregnant wife. Yeah. I'd like to pause for a moment in memory of Maria, and also to greet the people who are watching. And Rebecca, so you'll know where we have viewers joining us. Good morning to people tuning in from Atlanta, Georgia, Louisville, Kentucky, Norwich, Vermont, Houston, Texas. And we are also very glad to welcome international viewers who are watching as far away as Okinawa, Japan, Montreal in Canada, Medellin in Colombia, and other countries around the world. We're so glad to have you with us. Now, Vanda's parents, we now know, had been trying to have another child for some time. That was tragically and cruelly cut short. But Vanda and her father had to go on. They had no choice. You can't just stop. And they're also in the midst of a war. How did Vanda continue to survive? We know that she lived, but what made that possible?
So the first thing that her father did was hide her in the house, hide her in a cabinet or a box, she describes it as, in where there were dishes and kitchen supplies. And children of the neighborhood came by while she was in hiding and asked for her toys. And she describes being in this box and stuffing a rag in her mouth because she wants to scream out that she's alive and that she wants her toys. But she managed to stay quiet, and she couldn't stay in the house. Her father found her other hiding places. At one point, she hid at the theater he worked at, and also with neighbors, and constantly running and hiding.
So living almost like a hunted animal. But that incident that you describe, I mean, it's gutting because it's not only that people assumed that she was dead, but that kids she knew, presumably kids she had played with, saw it as an opportunity to
Right.
grab her stuff rather than to mourn her. From Vanda's testimony, we know that when the Soviet army approached Mariupol in 1943, as the tides of the war changed, the Germans forced the local population out of their homes and began burning many of them. What happened to Vanda and her father in this moment of chaos?
Well, war was raining down, bombs. It was beyond chaos. It was a horror scene. And the local population had to run. They ran into the fields away from the burning homes and the attacks. And she and her father hid in a cornfield. And once the Soviet army had taken back the city, and they were able to return, there was a mixture of joy and relief, but there were dead bodies, she said, everywhere, and from both sides of the conflict. And people were looking for their loved ones. And it was this terrible scene of relief and horror and sadness that they experienced.
It's an absolutely apocalyptic landscape. Too much trauma for any person to
Exactly.
experience, an adult, but let alone a kid.
Yeah.
We actually would like to share with you today Vanda describing the intense emotions that she felt at this moment once she realized that she no longer was being hunted by the Germans as a Jewish girl and that that part of the war was over for her.
Отец плакал, а я почему-то стояла как каменная. А потом, пройдя немножко, я подняла руки кверху и стала плакать и говорить: Господи, неужели я смогу видеть это солнышко? Неужели я смогу дышать свежим воздухом, так как все? Неужели мне не надо больше будет никогда прятаться? Никогда. И неужели я смогу жить на этом свете? Никто не будет ходить по моим пятам и не будет угрожать моей жизни.
It gets me every time. Yeah, I don't speak Russian. I know a few words, and it breaks my heart.
Yeah, even if just reading it from those subtitles, I agree. You can hear that terrible blend of both relief and absolute angst in her voice, even so many decades later. So, what happened to Vanda, Rebecca, in the subsequent years after the war? What did she do with her life?
Well, of course, she missed her mother dearly. And I learned about her life after the war. I was fortunate that a colleague of mine at Retro Report, who speaks Russian, reached her daughter yesterday to touch base and check in. And she told us that, as we know also from her testimony, she got married to a man named Dmitry. Here they are, the family. They had 2 children, Victor and Larissa. And they made a life for themselves in a city that they loved. Mariupol was a place they described as beautiful, with parks by the sea. And they just had, she became a kindergarten teacher. She was known as a joyous person by the rabbi who we spoke to. She was known as, her daughter described her as optimistic, even in the end, even at the end of her life, and just a joyous, happy person.
And that life and family that Vanda built in Mariupol reconstructed after the Holocaust was shattered last year following the Russian invasion. What was the direct and immediate impact on Vanda and her family? How old was she last year?
She was 91. And I love this picture of her. You can see her there in her home. And she was for 91 years old in relatively, stable health and doing well. But when the war broke out, they could not stay in their home. Her daughter and her son-in-law looked after her, and they had to go into hiding again, which is unimaginable. They found a basement in a store because their home, the bombs were coming down. It wasn't safe for them to stay in their home. And they went into hiding, and they lost electricity. They lost running water. They did not have access to enough food. Her daughter described the deprivation is so extreme. Vanda was freezing. Here she was, 91 years old. She started to not be able to get out of bed out of fear and cold and hunger. And she would bring her what little food she could. But her Vanda just kept asking, well, why is this happening again? How could this be happening again? It was a trauma that she was reliving at the end of her life, bookended with war as a child. Facing this again was unimaginable to her and to anyone, I think.
And you've related to me that in addition to just this disbelief that she was once again in war, that her daughter Larissa said that the terrible conditions that you described actually ultimately took a devastating toll on Vanda's health, right?
Yes, they couldn't get the medical care she needed. The deprivation of food and adequate nutrition and heat, she didn't survive. She died on April 4th. And her daughter believes she would have lived if not for this war. So she didn't die from a shelling, but she died from not getting the care that she needed and living in such horrible, horrible circumstances that nobody should have to, let alone an elderly person. And her family, her daughter and her son-in-law and the neighbors, they risked their lives really to take her body and bury it in a public park where Mariupol, the rabbi said, had turned into one big cemetery because people were burying people anywhere they could. And Vanda, it was her wish to be buried next to her late husband in the cemetery. And a month later, her son came back and snuck in and risked his life to move his mother and bury her next to her late husband. He said, I had to do it for Mama.
What an absolutely heartbreaking story and an ending for a life that began in fear and ended again in hiding amid violence. Excuse me. And in a speech, actually, that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky gave last May, he actually mentioned Vanda by name and recognized that she died on the 40th day of the war in a speech that he gave then.
Yeah, I wanted to just add how grateful her daughter was that the museum was recognizing her mother's life and loss and marking this day, and how important it always was to her mother that the Holocaust never be forgotten.
Well, we're glad if it brings some small measure of comfort to Larissa and to Victor, although of course we wish that we didn't have to know about Vanda, that she could be living a more unremarkable life. So thank you. We're hearing from so many viewers who've been moved by Vanda's story. One named Beth has written, such a sad ending to survive one war only to lose her life in another senseless war. Will the human race never learn? Rest in peace, dear Vanda. And similarly, Vicky writes, I pray for the people of Ukraine and for the world to open their hearts to those who are suffering, as this sweet lady suffered time and again. Rest in peace. Now, Rebecca, I'd like to turn to a different sort of trajectory that's happened for Holocaust survivors who are living in Ukraine last year. Vanda spent her life in and around Mariupol, but most Holocaust survivors who were in Ukraine last year fled to either elsewhere in the country or to other countries during the Holocaust. They had done so during the Holocaust, and many of them again had to flee for their lives during this war. How did they manage to get out of Ukraine this time in the chaos and violence?
Well, at the beginning of the war, as I'm sure a lot of our viewers will recall, seeing scenes at the border, it was chaos, it was congested. It was mostly women and children and the elderly that were escaping. And those Holocaust survivors that had family or were able-bodied, got out on evacuation buses or with the help of neighbors. I met one woman whose son who lived outside of the country, her sons, they urged her to hire the taxi driver she knew to drive her to the border. And he did. She got that taxi, she drove to that border. And then when the line was so long and realized she would have to wait days and she didn't have food or ability to go to the bathroom and she couldn't walk to the border, the other people in the taxi with her got out and walked. She had to go back home and wait for an evacuation bus, which she eventually got. But there are others, and this is where my reporting came in. I went to find out about those who did not have the ability to get out on their own, those frail elderly Holocaust survivors who were receiving services. Here we see some pictures of ambulances. This was the effort of the Claims Conference and the Joint Distribution Committee, people on the ground in Ukraine and elsewhere that made these incredible medical rescues to save the frail elderly of the Holocaust, to not abandon them again in their lives, in their older years, having been abandoned as children when they fled. Now they did not want them to be abandoned again. So there was a great effort made to get ambulances in a war zone and to get medical care and bring these people out. Anyone who wanted to, not everybody wanted to, but those who wanted to get out and were in danger were offered the opportunity, the survivors.
It's a truly Herculean effort. And for people watching who may not be as familiar with these organizations, they are two Jewish social service organizations. One is the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, which helps people in need in crisis zones all around the world and has for over 100 years, not only Jews, but anyone. And also the Conference on Material Claims Against Germany, which is a long-standing partner of our museum that assists Holocaust survivors and their descendants in pursuing claims of stolen property and other assistance that they can give to survivors. So this sort of intense, challenging evacuations of medically fragile people, in fact, was carried out for at least 167 Holocaust survivors during this past year, which is just extraordinary. I can't imagine having to do it for even one person, but they've managed to bring physical safety and security to so many. A number of European countries opened their borders to Ukrainian refugees in the past year. Rebecca, can you tell us about the significance of one country in particular that has welcomed in some Holocaust survivors?
Yes, of course. So this is what my reporting focused on. I was so amazed to learn that Germany was the country that was making it most possible to quickly evacuate and bring survivors to safety. It was a paradox that at this time in their lives and another time in war, that the country that once 80 years ago wanted to destroy them and kill them was now welcoming them. And it became a mission for these organizations, and the German government came together to get through the red tape to create these evacuations and bring them to places throughout Germany, to elder care homes and retirement communities, and bring them to safety. Here we see the German president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, and 3 survivors that were brought out. It was a real joint effort between private, public, and government and agencies to make it happen.
There's special poignancy to that photo. I mean, I imagine if you had told some of these survivors several years ago that they would need to flee their homes, they would not have believed you, and that the place that would shelter them would be Germany, which had caused so much distress and loss early in their lives, they might not have believed you either.
Exactly.
Rebecca, I know that you actually traveled to Germany as a reporter last summer, I think it was, and met with several Holocaust survivors from Ukraine who are now living there. Introduce us to some of them, please.
Yes, it was such a privilege and an honor to hear their stories current and past. I went to several of these elder care homes and also some people who were living privately and spoke to them. I want to tell you about a couple. These 2 women here in pink, we have Tatiana Zhrabliova, and next to her is Larissa, another Larissa Druzenko, and they have similar stories and similar trajectories. They both came from Kyiv, although they didn't know each other there. They both, as children, fled their homes in the Ukraine and took refuge farther east. Larissa took with her, they both went with their mothers. Larissa went to Kazakhstan and Tatiana to Uzbekistan, and they had to hide out for the war. Larissa, on the right, she remembers taking a train and an arduous journey during the war. They had not enough food. She escaped because her father, who was a journalist and Christian, said that the Jews would not be safe. So he knew more than some people knew. They knew they had to get out. So they took this train to Uzbekistan. They found a room to live in, but it was full of rats, she told me. And she remembers only 2.5 or so, but the memory of the rats jumping from the bed to the table to avoid the rats and not having enough food and the deprivation that she suffered stayed with her.
And I think it's a lesser known story and chapter of the Holocaust, Jews who survived by finding refuge in Central Asia. It's very personal for me because actually that's how my father survived as a little boy. He was a Polish Jew and survived part of the war in Kazakhstan himself. Tell us a little more about Larissa, though, please, and what she's like and what it's like for her now in Germany.
She is a very warm and intelligent woman, full of life. It was hard. She had ailing health. She has health issues she struggles with, so she wanted to get out. And she was one of the first group. She and her roommate were the first to get out with the help of the organizations by ambulance. She had been an engineer. She worked her whole life and lived in Kyiv, and she loved her life there. She was an active person, and didn't expect to, for the second time, be uprooted. But now she finds herself living in Frankfurt at the Budge Foundation, which is a special place that is home to both Jews and Christians. And they are able to take German lessons and to attend Shabbat services and have activities available to them.
And Larissa shared with you that she's acutely aware of some of the kind of bookending, as we'd said earlier, of her life, of first running for her life as a child and running again. Let's watch a clip from an interview that you conducted with Larissa a few months ago.
In 1941, we fled from the Germans. Now we've faced war once more, and now we've come to the Germans so they will protect us. This is the paradox. So maybe there is no such thing as permanent friends or permanent enemies. As soon as the situation improves there, I want to go back home. My motherland is there, That's all.
She really, I was there in May talking to her, and I can tell you, she didn't think a year would be a year. She didn't take her belongings. She took her medicines. Most of the people I spoke to, they said, well, we didn't have time to pack. This was a medical evacuation with bombs coming down. So we grabbed our medicines, and they didn't even take their photographs because they were so sure they'd be back in a few weeks, a few months. They love their country and they want to go back.
Absolutely. And it's got to be such a difficult adjustment. It's hard to be an immigrant when you choose to do it and at a younger age. And neither of those are true for these women and for the millions and millions of other Ukrainians today. Rebecca, I want to share with you before we close also a couple of other comments that are coming in constantly from people who are watching and the stories that are resonating. Isabel writes that on this 1-year anniversary of the Russian attack of Ukraine, how appropriate to remind us that history can repeat itself. We as Jews are very much threatened by anti-Semitism today. And a man named Stanislav writes, thank you for bringing these stories to life. I'm originally from Ukraine, and what's going on hurts me beyond imaginable, but the impact of the Holocaust survivors is just hard to comprehend. Any final thoughts in reaction to that?
I agree so much with what they're saying. It's unimaginable as a child to be born into war, to flee, to give up everything you have, and then to survive that. And then again, in your old age, when you think you're just going to live out your life in peace, suddenly everything is ripped away from you, your safety, your security, your friends, your family, everything you know, to go to a strange place, even if you are welcomed and you are safe, the trauma and the re-trauma is unimaginable.
Well, I think especially, and I speak as a historian of the Holocaust, to see the ways that Holocaust history and memory are being abused as an excuse for so many of the crimes being committed today. It is also important to remind ourselves of the human impact and the way that war affects individuals, including people who have lived through both of these conflicts. So I want to thank you, Rebecca, for making it so vivid and personal for us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we could remember Vonda and those who have been lost, as well as those who are still struggling.
I'm also struck listening to the survivors that we heard from today that they feel very homesick and they dream of the day that they can return home. We do hope that peace can be achieved in Ukraine, that we will see some measure of justice for the crimes that are being committed, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and that these Holocaust survivors and other Ukrainian refugees will be able to return and to try to rebuild their lives. Thank you, viewers, for joining us to mark this anniversary today. We hope it is the last time that we will have to mark it. Be safe and be well.